Okay, good morning, Advantage members. What's going on? Happy Monday. Welcome to a new week of market updates. So I want to start off with the aggr charts right here real quick. We just want to see what kind of volatility as well as high value orders that are coming through the flow right now, just so we get an idea of, as the US markets are slowly opening up. We got about a half hour to go till the US markets open up. We want to see how the futures are going to sort of give us an indication what kind of pressure that's going to place on the crypto markets. One thing I've noticed about the flow since the morning session is that it's been relatively even. I would say the sell side is a little bit more aggressive. I think a lot of shorts got squeezed out in the past, few hours or so when we made this big squeeze overnight. And now we're starting to roll over, right? So just keep that in mind that so far, I would say the sellers are kind of in control a little bit on the book by a small margin, okay? Let's get to the analysis. So as I mentioned, I think over the weekend, right, I stated that BTC has kind of been showing a loss of momentum, but also, in a sense, it's been decent because in this particular area of resistance, we've come back to this point of resistance multiple times, and we're consolidating under this resistance. So consolidating under resistance is, almost always pretty bullish, but you have to actually see follow through, right? This kind of movement has to happen. Now, again, if you're not familiar with why this area is resistance, right? If you actually zoom out on a 4-hour time basis, this is kind of how it looks, right? See, if you look at this movement right here, where you had this area of support, which got swept over the weekend, I think last weekend or 2 weekends ago, okay? We reclaimed that level right there, held it as support, and now we're fighting into the next resistance point, which is the resistance point right there, and right there. So we're desperately trying to find strength and willpower from the crypto markets to break above this level. Because if you break above this level, the chances are pretty high that you're going to target 23,000 and quite possibly all the way up to 24 and a half. 24 and a half is where this VWAP monthly is right there. See that? It's coming up like this, right? So it's coming up like that. That's right around, 24 and some change, right? 24.3K. Okay. That's what I would figure. If BTC were to show strength, we would break up to. Now, why do I say 23? Okay. So 23 is a kind of an interesting level because if we go to let me go to my different daily chart right here, right? So if we go to a different chart, you can kind of see this level. Okay, this was the last little push up before the big red candle dropped, which is where the Celsius insolvency, the Three Arrows Capital insolvency news, all that stuff started to come out like right around this area. And this was the last down candle that we got before this big, next lower low. Okay, so if bulls are strong, they will attack into this high. Doesn't mean they'll break the high. It just means that this is where a ton of liquidity is sitting. In the current market conditions, the name of the game is liquidity hunting, because there's just not enough money to slosh around to rip the market up or to rip the market down a significant amount, unless we see that the US equity markets are in a bid mode, right? We don't necessarily know that right now. So the problem is that we have to kind of rely on recognizing that, okay, yeah, the US equity market saw a big squeeze last week. BTC actually did not even have a big squeeze at all. So what does that mean? Well, maybe Bitcoin and crypto overall is not getting the same money flows that the stocks did last week, right? Here's how the stock market looked last week. Here's how BTC, did last week. Not really a big squeeze at all. Other aspects of crypto got a decent size squeeze. Like I think Solana basically went from 32, 33 all the way to 42, right? Matic I think also was a pretty strong contender. Matic was somewhere over here around 45, went all the way to 60 or 62 almost, right? Now it looks like, some of these alts are starting to show weakness and they might start breaking down. But, last week, some of the alts actually showed strength, which actually brought down Bitcoin dominance, right? So Bitcoin itself is not catching a bid in this environment. And that is, in my opinion, scary, because when only a few alts are catching a bid and Bitcoin itself is not, generally that's a sign that, okay, well, Bitcoin is going to chop around in a range. It might even have, potential lower low to put in the market. The only thing that we did in terms of positioning was we took a small short position on SNX. Again, you can go to the 5K channel and read the explanation of why I picked up the short position and what we're going to do with that. Again, that's only for Advantage members, but I just want to mention that, to y'all, that I'm still hanging on to that position, and we'll see how that trade pans out. I mean, I personally think SNX is pretty much topped because it had its own, massive squeeze right here. And I personally think it's going to keep breaking down and basically retrace almost this entire movement. Okay. It might even put in a lower low, but for now, it's just going to chop around. And I think it's going to just keep breaking down. Okay. That's my overall thought process on SNX and even some of these alts that have squeezed up a decent amount. Like I think Curve Finance also squeezed up a good amount, not as much as SNX. I think Aave also squeezed up a good amount. I think Aave is also going to start retracing some of that movement. I personally think Solana is also pretty close to like topping out over here. It might push up a little bit towards like 47, 48, but then after that, I'm kind of expecting, a rollover like further down. Same thing with Matic, same thing with Atom, and same thing with AVAX. Okay. Near, I also think is probably the same thing. I think they squeezed up pretty hard, in the past week, and I think they're going to start, beginning their decline. It kind of looks like, if you look at Near or Atom on a 4-hour basis or a multi-hour basis, they kind of look like they've formed like a distribution top, or they've created sort of your, first high, lower high, low, lower low, another lower low being set, right? So this is near term like a downtrend. Now you could say, well, what if this is like a bull flag? I mean, it could be, I guess, if you believe that we're going to, keep ripping up from here. Yeah, that's possible that it is a bull flag. I'm personally not sure. I feel like they're extended. Like I said, they may have a little bit more squeeze up to them, but I think most of the alts are pretty close to their near, like local top. Okay. Doesn't mean that, this may not be part of a big bottoming process. Like Matic, for example, right? Matic may have already put in a low and then it's trying to put in this local high. It might pull down here and then begin its next, uptrend like July or August or something, right? But either way, like, I don't think Matic is just going to consolidate quickly and just do this and do this and do this. I don't believe it. Because if Matic is doing that, I would figure that it's giving sort of an indication that, hey, parts of the market are bottomed. Matic might be the leader or Solana might be the leader, and they're going to sort of lead the market or parts of the market out of this, bear market, if you will. And I just don't think that there is any interest. I don't think there's any money just waiting to keep bidding up these assets. I still believe fundamentally that we're in the midst of a bear market and it's going to be choppy. Yes, you're going to get your long opportunities, on squeezes like this. At the end of the squeezes, you will have to decide if you want to get short. You also have to decide how big of a short you want to put on, how deep of a stop, what kind of position you want to put on in terms of how much the market is going to run against you before it ultimately drops. You got to think about all these things, right? So one of the reasons why I picked SNX is because I personally believe that it ran up way too fast, way too hard. I personally think SNX is kind of like a non-usable garbage product. And by the way, this is coming from someone who actually used SNX, right? I think there's like a huge thread about how under used SNX is as a platform. There's like maybe 10 or 12 users around the world who actually use it. There's barely like, any activity happening on, the SNX network. So the point is like, okay, well, from a fundamental standpoint, I think it's kind of garbage. And then from a technical standpoint, I also think it's topped. Like it's great that it already took out these highs from May. So now I don't have to worry about more liquidity to the upside, unless SNX is going to, fundamentally change their tokenomics or their network, then it might squeeze up higher. But like I said, size is small. As the market keeps going down, I might add to this position. Okay. From a volume perspective and like a moving average perspective, right? I think on a daily basis, one thing that it's abundantly clear is we are kind of grinding up like this on a very sort of steep decline in volume. Now, I'm not someone who thinks that just because you have a decline in volume and a grinding up movement like this, I don't necessarily think that's completely bearish, because the other way to look at it is you could say, well, okay, well, I mean, the market keeps going up even on low volume, right? That means that the market is actually does not require a whole lot of volume to keep pushing it up. In fact, the market could be moving up because there's just lack of sellers on the way up, or there's tremendous, buying happening, or it might just be simply that things are getting short squeezed, right? But that may not be reflected in huge volume. Maybe it just doesn't take that much money to move the market up, right? Maybe that's why the volume is so low. So there's all kinds of ways to look at, volume and price discrepancies. And I don't think it's completely fair to just say, well, this and this just means bearish. Yes, like technically, more often than not, it is bearish because you're in a downtrend already. You want to see sort of volume, especially to the buy side, pick up as the market keeps pushing up. But it's not always, the case that it has to be bearish when you see the volume and price discrepancy. Okay, so just letting y'all know. I think Ethereum is kind of the same way, right? If we go to ETH, if you look at the volume sort of analysis right here, right? Look at that. It's a sharp drop, right? And then you start seeing prices grind up and volume is, continuously dropping, right? Not necessarily completely bearish, but, I wouldn't say this is like definitely bullish, right? Real quick before I forget, right? So remember I told you about BTC attacking that 23,000 high. See this one right here? One of the reasons why I kept trying to long BTC last week, and we were successful on 2 attempts of our longs, and 1 attempt we got, well, actually 2 attempts we got, we manually closed out of our position because we just didn't see a breakout, right? So 2 wins, 2 losses. I mean, it kind of just, ended up as like a net, I would say neutral trade. It didn't really cost us a whole lot of money, but it also didn't really make us a whole lot of money because I was expecting a breakout, right? I was expecting a breakout to this candle high of June 16th. See that right there? And you can see Ethereum went into that candle high. You can see, say, for example, I don't know, Solana quite easily went into that candle high of June 16th, right? This is June 16th. Solana clearly exceeded that. Solana even went all the way to this last little area on June 8th and 9th before it rolled over, right? So you could kind of see that I feel like Solana is getting very, very close to an area where it has, near term topped. And if it does, say, come down, right, I would figure that Solana is going to come somewhere near these 2 trend lines or both. This trend line right here, where you start seeing, where you start seeing something like this, right? So if this breaks down, okay, if I put a price label on this, say it breaks down over the next, 5 to 8 hours, right? If it breaks down, it will be somewhere around $34. This descending trend line, see this right here? This descending trend line comes from the highs of May 15th. It has tapped the price multiple times. Solana broke out of it, right? If it comes back, it might try to meet both this ascending trend line and this descending trend line right here, somewhere around $33, $34. Okay. Again, I think part of this probably depends on what ultimately happens with BTC, and BTC ultimately depends on what will happen with the US equity markets, which, well, are they going to get huge bids up today? Is the market going to sell off today? You can kind of see Tesla in pre-market is up, a decent amount. VanEck Semiconductors, that one doesn't show pre-market. Pre-market Russell shares, right, which is the small cap ETF, slightly up. Apple also up 1.5 or so on the pre-market. So you can kind of see pre-market's looking good. So that may drag up crypto a little bit with it, but overall, I still believe that the market is in a very sort of weird, precarious area, and we cannot definitively say that, well, hey, Bitcoin has to squeeze up from here. And that's what I thought, all of last week, but didn't do that. So it just means that maybe Bitcoin is weaker than we thought, right? There's like all kinds of stuff that's happening in crypto that's just weird. Looks like Anonymous is targeting, Do Kwon. Then you see, it looks like, Voyager has talked about, having issued notice of default for Three Arrows Capital. Three Arrows Capital is still going through their own insolvency issues. This thing right here was kind of interesting that this person wrote a thread on, which is like, first of all, how screwed is BlockFi? And then with BlockFi, the Three Arrows Capital contagion, and who else could be, facing a default or an insolvency that we don't know of yet, right? Because the only thing that we knew of like maybe a week or two ago was Celsius, and then Three Arrows Capital came up, and then Voyager came up, and then BlockFi came up. And now you're like, well, what the hell? Like if the contagion is so big, who else is about to get screwed, right? I think CoinFlex was another exchange that was supposedly, trying to block withdrawals. So you can see it's like the dead bodies, if you will, they're slowly starting to float up, and you're starting to realize, oh my God, like, there's a lot of contagion happening in the crypto space, and it may be worse than, today. Like next week might be worse than today, and the week after might be worse. But at some point, everything will get flushed out. We just don't know when that will happen, how much of a drag that will create on price, right? How much of a drag that will create on the crypto space, okay? But for now, I focus on good assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. I'm trying to take short trades here and there. Like I said, in the 5K challenge account for our Advantage members, we took the SNX short. I think there's opportunities. Like if you want to get, a pair trade going, pair trade meaning you can get long in Bitcoin and you can get short in altcoins, right? So like I said earlier, right, if you're expecting upside from BTC, the first easy target is 23,000. And then after that is the VWAP monthly, which is somewhere around like, 24,500 or so. Okay. Which is right here, right? That's like one way you can go about it as a simple, long trade on BTC. And the problem with Bitcoin is that, as I had pointed this out earlier, it continuously has shown the inability to break through resistance. You can see this number one right here. That's the first failed trend line. We broke that, went to 20,000, found support on it. Then we created this uptrend right here, the second failed trend line. We broke that, kind of rejected it. Then we created this third sort of trend line right there, right? See that right there, this third trend line that looks like this. We broke that right there, tried to reclaim it. Now, once again, we're struggling to stay above it. So you can see like BTC is clearly struggling around this area. But if and when it can just get above 21,500 and stay, if it could do that, I think it's a clear shot towards 23,000. Okay. I think probabilities of BTC heading to 23,000 is like, say, 55%. Failing and starting to break down from here, I think is 45%. So I'm not saying that Bitcoin definitely has to break up. As you can see, it's like 55-45. Not really a whole lot of edge, Right now, I would say from a macro perspective, what I'm looking at in the market is, even if the market does move up, say to 23, I would be sort of very remiss to call that the beginning of a new bull trend or anything. I would say it is entirely possible to create a huge range chop like this over the next few months, or next few weeks rather. Okay. So getting to 23 is not like the end all, be all of how the next bull market is going to start. We're pretty far away from those thoughts, in my opinion. From the macro perspective, like, here's a couple of things I mentioned to Advantage members, right? So if you're looking for certain correlations of how to look at macro, for bulls, you want very simple things to play out. Okay. So if you want to be long in the market and you want to be bullish, you want the dollar to break down, right? So the DXY is right here. Okay. So the DXY, you would ideally want it to break down further and further. So far, the DXY is like just floating near the highs. I mean, it's not completely like bearish and it's not really bullish, but it's more bullish than bearish because, the DXY has shown incredible resilience to keep pushing up. And from a macro perspective, like, the dollar is strong because around the world, people are piling into dollars. World and global trade requires dollars to have in your central banks, in your currency reserves. So, for example, a country like Sri Lanka or Pakistan, many African countries, many South American countries, they require dollars to have access to goods in the world for trade. If you don't have enough dollars, that means that you're not going to be able to conduct trade. So countries overall will inevitably flock to the dollar, right? It's not like they're going to flock to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is still in general a speculative asset, right? But dollar is still king. So if the dollar keeps pressing up, it can create a whole host of issues, which is, more and more people are piling into dollars. There's more demand for dollars. Even bigger funds and institutions might be piling into dollars because they may feel that the stock market, the crypto market, the commodities market are just not safe. And they may say cash is king, dollar is king, right? So that in effect means if the dollar keeps going up, you should just assume that the stock market overall is going to stay range bound or is going to keep slowly heading down. And of course, crypto will also, slowly head down as well. Right. So that is sort of the thought process of where we are in terms of, looking at the dollar. Then, you want to keep in mind other things like, for example, oil. Okay. One of the main issues that's been facing the world is inflation, right? Inflation is in general directly tied to oil prices. Why oil? Because oil is one of the biggest commodities that is used to move goods around the world. Oil is used in tankers, in ships, cargoes, trucks, airplanes, right? Anything really, you need oil, okay? And when oil prices are high, gas prices are high, that means that price itself is passed on to the goods, which is then passed on to the consumer. So the consumer is seeing these high inflation prices, partly because oil prices are high, because of the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. They're blocking a significant chunk in a supply of oil. So as long as the oil prices, in my opinion, as long as they stay above $100, probably 98, 97, right? If they stay above 100, things are still going to be pretty high in the inflation world. And if they're high in the inflation world, that means that the Fed is still going to have to crush demand. They can't do anything about the supply because the Fed doesn't control what Russia does or what Saudi Arabia does with their supply or what Iran does or Venezuela, right? What the Fed can control is the demand. So basically the Fed and the central banks around the world, they're going to say, well, we're just going to make people more poor so they just buy less shit, which is like a really messed up way of going about it. But like they have no other way to go about it right now because they don't have a control over Russia and Ukraine war. They don't have a control over Saudis and Iran. The government can enact different foreign policies to do that, but the Fed cannot. The Fed can only bring in certain things under control, such as the amount of liquidity, the amount of money in the system, and they can then crush demand. Crushing demand would mean raising interest rates, quantitative tightening, and then probably guiding the economy into a recession. All these things suck. Point is, you don't really have that much control over it. All you can do is you can look at the market and say, well, what can I do about it, right? How can I react to stuff like this? How can I make money in stuff like this? So that's why I'm telling you, as a bull, you want the dollar to break down. You want oil and key commodities like copper to start breaking down. And you want US equities to start to break or start to show strength, right? So this effectively would mean that crypto might get a bid. And these are some key stocks that you should watch, just in case you're watching for the market to be bid up, if you are trying to be bullish. Now, as a bear, you want the dollar to keep breaking up. You want oil and copper to keep breaking up. And you want the US equity rally from last week. Okay. Where's the US equity rally? Hang on. Okay. So if we go to the S&P 500, right, we had a big rally last week. You want this rally to start getting retraced this week itself, like quickly, because the more and more time you spend at the local highs, you might start, pressing a little bit higher. If you don't want that to happen, right, and you don't want that to happen as a bear, obviously. Okay. So anyway, and if that does happen for bears, again, critical levels for crypto is Bitcoin at 20,000 and Ethereum at 1,000 and Solana at 30, right? These are still key levels. And then sort of lastly, there is a fractal that I've been pointing out that looks like 2018 almost. If you actually look at 2018, right? So let's do this right here. Let me drag this out back in 2018. I don't know if some of y'all were around back then, but trust me, that bear market sucked. This one sucks too, but that one was like, everything was dead. Like no one was here, because builders just stopped building because they're like, well, we're poor. Like we don't have any money. And investors, mostly within crypto, were gone because they went completely broke. This time around is a little bit better in my opinion. Obviously, we're not done with the bear market yet, but it's a lot better than 2018. All right, so bear market wise, here's kind of what we saw in 2018 that reminds me of where we are now. So assuming that 4,000 is the current 20,000 and 6,000, which was, say, if 6,000, right, was a floor, okay, so this 6,000 area right there was the floor back then, which ultimately broke, which is, similar to the 30,000 floor right here, which also ultimately broke right about there, right? Then that means that we made the first tag to 17.5 down here. Okay, that's the first big low. But guess what? There's also a bit of a break right here, a bit of a pause around 20,000. Because guess what? At 20,000, we paused right there, broke below it, quickly reclaimed, and we're now staying above 20,000. So that means 20,000 is also an important level, right? So keep in mind 30,000 and 20,000. And then over here, the levels are 6,000 right there, which ultimately broke as a floor in 2018. And then on a 4-hour basis, right? Once again, let me see here, right? It's 4,000 right there, okay? 4,000 was sort of that next floor, which was the 20,000 floor for us. And we quickly reclaimed that, tried to stay above it, and then ultimately broke down, put in a new low all the way down to about $3,100, $3,200 back in the December 2018 time. I believe that we're going through a similar path right now. It may not take all the way to December. I think we're going to probably accelerate it, but I think we're somewhere here. And if we keep breaking down, that means that we might head down on BTC in a path like we did back then, like this. See this white thing right here? This is what happened in 2018. So that means that BTC might, at minimum, head down towards 16, 15.5, maybe lower, but that's what I'm thinking right now. Like the percentage measurements when 4,000 broke down, it went all the way to about 25, 27% down. And that measurement from here down is about 15,500. Okay. Again, hard to do sort of exact figures. I don't necessarily know how it's going to pan out, but that's all I'm saying. And then on a weekly basis, like here's kind of how that looks, right? On a weekly basis, we are historically sitting on key weekly moving averages. Okay, we have the 200 EMA, which is the black right there, which is currently around 27,000, by the way. And then we have the 200 MA weekly, which is 22,350 or so, right? So back from 2015 days, way back here, we basically retested both and then pushed up, retested both and then pushed up. The March 2020 COVID crash, we tested both, wicked much lower, and then moved up. And once again, we're kind of sitting here under both. In fact, we're now spending a few, at least 2 weeks so far under the 200 weekly MA, right? We might consolidate at these lows like we did back here in 2018. So you could see that the 2018 path is much more similar to where we are in 2022 versus 2022 and 2020 as a comparison. All right. So I'm just letting y'all know that even if you think that the market has bottomed, it's not going to instantly reverse back up. At least like the probabilities are low of that. So you're going to get plenty of time. If you believe that the market is bottom, you're going to get plenty of time at the lows. So just keep that in mind. Stay patient. You don't need to get, excited and antsy right away. All right. I know it could be very hard to avoid your trigger finger. This is why in the advantage side, we try to tell people to be patient. We try to exercise as much risk management to let members know, how to utilize leverage properly or how to place your stops properly, how not to trade, in certain conditions. Almost everyone thinks that just because a market is open 24/7, that you have to be in a trade. Almost everyone thinks that just because something is showing flashy red or green signs that you have to go short or you have to go long. You have to avoid this kind of stuff in these predatory market conditions, or else the market will completely wipe you out. Okay. So just remember that. And if y'all need any help, again, just shoot me a message, things that you're struggling with or dealing with, and we can talk about it. All right. I think that's pretty much it overall. I feel like I've covered everything. Make sure y'all read some of these threads that I put up on my Twitter feed. Really, really smart people, who are talking about the space, the things that they're dealing with, or things that they're discovering about the fragility of the crypto markets. And I truly believe the fragility of the crypto markets is really being tested, to a degree that it's never been really tested before. And it makes sense because as the market gets bigger and as more and more players enter with different risk tolerances, you're going to get big blowups, right? It's almost inevitable, okay? It's just how much of the blowup will happen, what kind of contagion will it lead to, who is insolvent, and then what part of the space is still alive, right? Who is the who is the project or the platform that doesn't die, that lives on to the next bull cycle? What kind of rails and infrastructure do we build so we could carry that up to the next bull cycle? Right. So that's kind of what I'm doing research in right now. Bear markets are for research. You want to start paying attention to what is out there that is of good value. A good article to read is Arthur Hayes's Floaters article. He discusses all things related to, where we are in the crypto market right here. What is, of value that you need to start looking at, whether it's DeFi or DEXs or NFTs or NFT platforms. Right, Arthur Hayes discusses that. Multicoin Capital right here, another really good article about the verticalization of NFT marketplaces. And then last but not least, other things that you should read to get yourself smarter and up to date is Arca blog. These guys publish a blog every week. Make sure you read it. This is a very smart guy, Jeff Dorman, who publishes his thoughts about how he sees the market, how he sees, the space of crypto growing, and it's all for free. Right. So you get to see the inside of this stuff. Some of these people are obviously, very wrong from time to time. No one is 100% right all the time, but at least you get to hear their thoughts and you get to do research on your own. Okay. So anyway, that's all I got. Do y'all have any questions? Is there anything specific you want me to cover? Let me take a sip of water and you let me know if you want me to cover anything. Okay. All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So Advantage members, I'll let y'all know what we're going to be doing with the trades today, what we're going to potentially, hedge or go long in, and then what we might double down on in terms of shorts. Free members, again, always feel free to ask me questions in the general channel right here. Just hang out, share your thoughts, share your ideas. And, almost inevitably, we will all get smarter. We will all get better as the day goes, as the weeks go in this bear market. Okay. Good luck to y'all. Take care. Talk soon.